Welcome to 21st Century Radio. I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronimus. Our executive producer is Laura Kortner, and A.Y. Warshaw runs our board. Joining us this portion of our program is Kyle Baird. Kyle is the Executive Vice President of World Vets. World Vets help communities worldwide facing the impact of natural and man-made disasters. They work with local organizations in helping to rescue animals in harm's way, as well as to educate others worldwide about proper animal care. They make 50 trips in 36 countries each year, expressing why they are called World Vets. In fact, one interview I had scheduled prior with their founder, veterinarian Kathy King, was postponed because she and others were on their way to Japan after the earthquake and nuclear disaster that followed. Here to share with us their amazing work, it is my pleasure, Kyle, to have you join us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe.
For sure. It's been something I've been just absolutely fascinated by, of how a group of, some 1,500 registered vets in your organization deploy worldwide?
Yeah, it is. And besides veterinarians, there's the majority of the people are just volunteers that are either animal lovers or have other skills in the veterinary industry, such as technicians or students.
So when one thinks about that kind of emergency response, we watch the Red Cross and we watch international aid communities. Most people aren't aware that even in our own country, you all are deployed during these terrible environmental challenges. So describe for us the actual way in which you go about doing the work you do. Like, give us an example of what happens when there's a flood somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Well, right now there's a flood in Thailand, and that'd be a great example to talk about. So when we start hearing that there's, the flood has kind of been something that has sort of come upon us slowly, and it was nice for us. We had time to prepare, and what we try to do is get someone out there on the ground as soon as possible. We have 2 veterinarians and a first responder out there now. And we send them with as many veterinary medical supplies as we can, and then we try to keep the shipments coming. And I think one of the things in developing countries, when you have a disaster like this, there's not as many veterinarians as there are here in the United States, and so every hand that can help and every medication that we can get to them is of real use.
When, for instance, I know during Katrina, it was probably the first time Americans really saw the consequence of animals being abandoned. And then you heard afterwards people saying, I will never leave my home again without my animals. And I understand there's been a change in some way in policy. But so let's say, so you put now, as an example, in Thailand, you have your first responder on the ground. They're sent over with medications. But what kind of environments how do you go about actually being of service? I mean, it's so mind-boggling, the scale of the tragedies that ensue. How does a group of volunteers who sometimes don't even speak the language show up and start acting as a rescue force?
Right, exactly. And I think the news is saying right now that there are something like 60,000 to 80,000 dogs that are just loose. And we've seen pictures. There's some pictures on our Facebook page and on our website where dogs will just find high ground, and there'll be a whole group of like 100 dogs hanging around one area. And so, obviously with that kind of number, we can only help so many. And there are organizations over there in Thailand as well, and we try to work with them, and we're kind of the muscle behind what they're doing. We get the supplies to them, and then get our people out there and try to work as a team with the people that are already there and on the ground and know the area.
So you had mentioned, that I know that you're not a vet, but that you were drawn to this work. How did you get involved?
Yeah, so I've worked in the veterinary business for about 12 years, and on the business side of the veterinary business, the supply side, and I went on a couple World Vets trips, and my wife was a technician when we first met, and she, we both love animals, and so she went on a World Vets trip and then said, you got to go on one of these things. It's a blast. And so the first trip I took was to Nicaragua, and we did a spay and neuter clinic in Nicaragua, and we probably spayed and neutered, probably 300 animals. And I was hooked after that. It was, seeing the people, you can tell that people love their pets just like we do here. And they don't know what they, how to treat them. They don't have access to flea medications, anything like that. So a lot of times you'll see animals that are real thin. They have fleas all over them, and those are things that we can help fix, really right away and make a real good impact on that. And then we've done another one that was a great one. Both my wife and I, we really love donkeys, and in Africa, they use donkeys. They still use a donkey for a lot of work that they do. They use them for carrying water, carrying, pulling wagons, whatever kind of work that you would do with a wheelbarrow. And I would say that Africans maybe have the same relationship with their donkey in general that we might have with a wheelbarrow. They look at a donkey as just a tool. And because of that, a lot of the donkeys are abused or malnourished, and they have areas where they're just, they hook them up and they use a rope to hook them up to a couple of buckets, and the rope will rub back and forth on their back, and it will cause this big wound. It never gets treated, and it gets to be a pretty rough situation for that donkey. So we were able to go down there and do that, and we're really working on starting a whole new trip where we can get a bunch of veterinarians down there, a bunch of students, a bunch of technicians to really massively take care of these donkeys in the area.
But you're also describing a cultural difference. I mean, I know that in Nicaragua, where you mentioned you have a spay and neuter clinic, that in Central America or in Latin America especially, they won't let dogs be neutered. The men down there, at least not the male dog, they'll spay the female, but they won't neuter the male. And so I imagine in each culture there's a different attitude about animals than some of us have. There's some Americans who will abuse an animal just like anybody else will abuse an animal somewhere around the world. But so how do you deal with that when there's a real cultural difference between looking at an animal as just a utility, like our unfortunate scientific medical labs do? They just look at it like it's a thing with no conscience, no feeling, no life rights, just because they're not human. I mean, so how do you go about addressing that?
Yeah, so I've definitely got to echo what you say with that. In Central America, the cultural thing down there is this sort of machismo, and I just find it hilarious when we go down there. Probably, if we do 300 sterilizations, 290 of them will be stays.
Right, they'll be female dogs.
Yeah, because the men, and then when you think about a stay is like a real surgery, where a neuter is way less invasive, way easier to do. But it is such a cultural thing. The men do not want that dog to not be intact, and it cracks me up because an unneutered dog is more likely to roam. There's all these reasons that it would be great to neuter them.
Well, the female can only be impregnated once with a litter and then impregnated again, but a male dog can go and impregnate 100 dogs. I mean, it's
exactly
so idiotic
that
it's
so. We know that nothing is going to change overnight, and it's a slow change, and so we really try to educate them on. I think our priority is really, instead of trying to change that culture, if we can spay dogs, that's a really big thing too. And we just try to work within the culture and do the best work that we can. And I think over the long term, some of these things will change. With the donkeys, that's one too where we think that if we start in the schools and start with kids and talk about respecting animals and that kindness to animals is a positive thing, we think that we can really change that. And again, these are really long-term propositions, but that's what we're about. We want to be doing this for a long time. We want to be around and really turn this into an organization that really helps a lot of animals over a long period of time.
So, for instance, going back to Katrina, Did you all have teams deployed in Louisiana and elsewhere?
Yeah, so during Katrina, we did not, and because we've been a kind of a rapidly growing organization. We were founded in 2006, and when Katrina, so typically, we were founded with international veterinary projects in mind, and we're to do a U.S.-based one. There's a lot more moving parts. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to make sure that if we got involved, we did it in the right way, and that we didn't step on other people's toes. And we think that we have the infrastructure now to respond to a U.S. disaster. But definitely at the time when Katrina happened, we didn't feel like we did. Mm-hmm. It is a lot more complex situation in the U.S. where with Japan and with Thailand, I mean, those are just people looking for help. And with Japan, we were able to ship a whole, couple train load or a couple, shipping container loads of product, food, and medical supplies over to Japan. And that was a huge amount of product to get to them. I don't know that anybody else got more over there for us. It was strictly veterinary, and that was a really big help to them. And, we didn't stop right at, I think the news media, they kind of stopped covering it, a month afterwards. But we're still sending stuff over there because we know that, there's still loose dogs. There's still dogs that are unclaimed. There's, they still need our support.
And what happens after a natural disaster in another country and there are all these animals? Do they just start euthanizing them? I mean, do they just start killing them all?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that happens, and that seems to be kind of a default way of dealing with those kind of problems in a lot of places. But I think it varies by situation. So on a lot like Japan, I don't know if many dogs have been euthanized, but we're trying to do our part to make sure that doesn't happen.
And so then your goal is education and assistance.
Uh-huh.
So when you deploy, how many people deploy? I mean, you described in Thailand that you have about 3 people down on the ground, but I know a lot more than those go when you do one of your larger response teams. Right.
So a typical response would be 20 people, and that would be a typical team that would do a project, 20 to 25 actually, and so, this with what's happening in Thailand right now, we're just getting, our news back from our people that are down there, and we don't even know if the infrastructure is there to handle a whole team. One thing we don't want to do is send people over there and then not have a way for them to really work. So this team is kind of like a first responder team that can look at the situation, see what the magnitude of the disaster is, and then see if we can get to the places that we need to go to get the work done that we need to get done.
Well, I remember in Japan there were people fleeing Japan, and you all were going into Japan. I mean, do you find that when you have first responders on the ground that the news you get is different than the mainstream media news?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely different stories that you see. The Thailand thing has been weird. That there hasn't been all that much coverage on it.
Practically none, I might add.
I've seen more coverage on it's affecting disk drive prices than and electronic components prices than anything else. So I
think we call that the World Inc. response. That's World Inc. INC. That's the World Inc. response. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just thinking out loud here.
Yeah. So I think that I guess what we're seeing from our limited point of view of the people that we have down there, there's just a lot of water everywhere. There's it's sort of chaotic, and it's. I think the flooding was a shock to our first responder who's an employee of World Vets. I think the amount of flooding was a shock to him.
Oh, it has to be. I mean, things that go on around the world that our media doesn't cover, which is costing far more lives than the disasters in our own country that we do cover. it's a very interesting phenomenon. While we have global access, we don't really have a value of that life is valued the same. Some lives are more important than other lives, and the media covers the lives, I guess. I don't know. I'm out of it now. I used to be, every day of my life was in the media, and I don't understand how degenerate it's become. I just don't understand why it has become such a lousy. It's hardly a third estate. It's more like a back porch. Anyway, so we're going to take a little break. I want to come back and talk a little bit about the volunteers and what volunteers do. There might be some people in our audience who love animals, who also like to travel, who like to be of service, and this might be right up their alley. So we'll be right back. If you've just tuned in, I'm Zohara Hieronimus. Our guest is Kyle Baird, Executive Vice President of World Vets, and you can find them at www.worldvets.org. So, Kyle, I still have a lot of questions for you. It's just sort of boggling to my mind of how one deploys, goes into a disaster area, shows up to do good, and then is able to. And I know that you mentioned that you have a lot of volunteers. In fact, your vets volunteer, but you have others that aren't vets, and they want to participate. And if they go to your website, they'll find, and we'll talk about some of these. You have trips to the Caribbean, to the Dominican Republic, to Belize, to the Honduras, and other places. So how do volunteers help? What do they do?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, let me start with Unskilled Volunteers, because that's what I am. And, I have no veterinary skill whatsoever, and they still need people just like me on these trips and on these projects. And somebody, for me, I can't do any kind of treatment, but I can restrain animals. I can try to communicate with the local people, and I can clean up, and I can watch animals in recovery. There's a lot of things that I can do as an unskilled volunteer. So you don't have to be anything but someone who loves animals and really wants to help to go on one of these trips. And but
how long does a general trip last?
Usually they last about 7 days, and they range. Some of them last a little longer. Sometimes they're 10 or 11. My wife went to Mongolia, and that trip was a little longer. They had to travel quite a bit to get to the place in Mongolia that they were going.
And does everybody pay their own way?
Yes. So you are responsible for your flight, and then there's a trip fee that pays for your living, your food, and all that stuff. Most of what your expenses while you're in that country. So
the organization takes care of establishing where everyone will live, and then a volunteer pays their ticket price as well as the price to be a participant. And then how else does World Vets get funded?
So we have, there's a few ways. We have a few foundations that sponsor us, the biggest one being the Foundation Brigitte Bardot out of Paris. And then we have corporate sponsors as well from the veterinary industry. Some of the suppliers in the industry also donate product and their services as well.
Do you happen to know what that represents monetarily, all of that donation?
We get all that together. I would say with product and everything, maybe $1.5 million.
Mm-hmm. A year.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so then your vets, though, the vets themselves also volunteer and pay their way?
Yeah, they sure do.
How interesting! What a beautiful concept. And
it is. It works really well, and I think that from a standpoint of someone that is volunteered on the trips, you really feel like you could go take a vacation somewhere and enjoy yourself, but this is about doing something. You come back feeling really good. You worked hard during the trip, but you got to see a really cool country, and then the things that you experience on a trip like this with the local people are things that you would never experience. We went to Ecuador and the Ecuadorian people, we got to know them so well, and we actually got to build relationships with individuals there. And people would come in and to the clinic, and we'd they'd be there all day, and you just hang out with them, and it was just the best, and everybody, they're all people that love their pets, so we have that bond in common, and it just, it's a blast. It's something real unique and real fun to do.
Well, it's so interesting you mentioned about the pets, because I remember I don't know if it was on your website. No, it was somewhere I was reading about where they don't, in Tanzania, where they don't think of a dog as a pet, but a pest or a defense tool, but they laugh if somebody pets a dog.
I mean, that is exactly
it's
right.
Such an anathema to
they
us.
Definitely, and I think when you in observation, I don't know if this is a correct observation. This is just my observation from being in these places, that the more close to sustenance living that maybe
Sure.
an area is that people are, the less concern that they have for an animal as a pet, or the less they want to have a relationship with that animal. And as the country starts to develop, and the economics of the country allow for maybe a higher standard of living, the people start to appreciate pets more. It seems that would just be a real generalization.
Well, I think that's very logical.
That's something that I've observed.
If you don't have much and you're just trying to stay alive and feed your family, you don't have that. What we do in this country, the billions of dollars are spent on pampering our pets, all the way from clothes stores for them to little hotels now. It's the surrogate children thing. But it interests me from a perspective of, for nations where animals are so critical to their agriculture, you would think there would be a different kind of respect for the animal. I mean, the way you describe the donkeys, and that they have these horrible festering sores from carrying the water, you would think that they could make the connection that when the donkey dies from disease, there's a relationship between the fact that they didn't just put a blanket or something on its back so it didn't get the sores. I mean, it almost seems illogical.
Yeah, I think with donkeys, it's kind of like a market thing, because I think there's they don't castrate their donkeys, so there's a lot of them, so that a donkey is not very expensive in Africa, and I think they look at them like, oh, just use them up, and just get it like a wheelbarrow, use it until it breaks and get a new one, and it's interesting too, like the day in the life of a donkey. We met a couple of veterinarians over there that have done a lot more work on this, and they said that the day in the life, a donkey will get up at 6 a.m. It will work all day. So it'll be carrying water in the morning, and then maybe carrying brush or pulling a wagon in the afternoon, work until 7 or 8 at night, and then the owner will just turn it out, and the donkey will have to go find water and food. And in the dry season, sometimes those donkeys will go like 3 days without water, and eating just kind of whatever they can find, and working all day. And then the craziest thing is the donkey comes back in the morning. It comes right back and it's ready to work again in the morning. It's just a loyal animal. It's something that just gets me emotionally when I think about it. They were just nice donkeys.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know so many people in this kind of work, and I have such deep respect for all of you that do it, because I think I'd just be a crying mess. I guess, I mean, people say, no, you get used to it. Well, I don't know that I would get used to it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to see, but I think that, you when you're doing something to help them, it feels really good, and you can see a tangible difference, and really that's why I'm doing this. That's why I work for World Vets. That's why I go on these trips, and I donate my money this way, because this stuff is important to me. And
for anybody,
so I think that, like, when I'm there, when I come back, I have this. I get a little choked up talking about it. But when I'm there, it's like all about work, and you're just helping them.
I understand that. I mean, I know enough emergency responders who deal with human disaster and human need, and they all say that you get in, you do your work, and then you go home and cry.
Exactly.
Exactly. That we are humans. We do have hearts, and we do have our own sensitivities. And I guess I have a particular sensitivity about animals in general and nature all around. So when you then look at how you do it, so describe for us, for instance, I noticed that you do these equine missions to Grenada, and you have one coming up. What happens?
Yeah, so Grenada, it's a very interesting town. So they're one of the primary modes. I mean, there's about 100,000 people living in this town, and the primary mode of transportation is still horse. And so there's like 4,000 horses in this town, which is a lot of horses. And they just don't have access to any kind of veterinary care. So we'll go down there, and we go 2 to 3 times a year. So they know we're coming. They know where we go, and we set up an area where we can work on the horses, and people just bring by their horses, and we'll treat them for whatever they've got. And sometimes there can be some extensive treatments for the things that we can do down there, and sometimes it's just quick, floating their teeth, whatever. So. And then we can worm them and vaccinate them and all that too. So those are really good things to help that. But you can see we can only probably treat in the time that we go. Maybe we treat 250 horses, 300 horses. So to get all 4,000, it's going to take a number of years to do that. But that's kind of our goal to do that and educate. At the same time we're down there, we're always training local veterinarians. They're working hand in hand with us. Our veterinarians are training their veterinarians, so it's a really good help and a really good partnership.
When you then do return visits, obviously the communities then expect you to come, appreciate that you come, and that must change over time. I mean, you described going there a number of times a year. Are there other places that you've been going repeatedly that you've seen a change because of your presence?
Yeah, definitely. I think all the ones that about, from what I understand, about the third trip, you start to see some of the same faces, and things start to change. Where there would once be a lot of a crazy amount of dogs just running loose, you might see less of that. More dogs are being treated. The general look and feel of the dog, the typical dog that comes in, or the cat. Cats are more rare. But the general look and feel of the dog it's a better health, than they have been. So,
oh, that's
exactly.
lovely.
So over the long term, I think that we can definitely. We're doing some studies right now to really key in on this and to be able to show it. But definitely from a standpoint of what people are saying and what we hear, there's a really good outcome.
Have you ever had an experience where a community said, go away? I mean, I can't imagine it, but it's possible with governments the way governments can be.
Right. We have not yet. And, I think there's always local politics, and there's always things that where, sometimes you'll have like a government that's unfriendly, or that for some reason they don't want you doing this. We haven't had anybody say go away when we're down there. Usually we try to figure out where the friendly places are going to be, so that when we get down there, we can actually do the work we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit. You have this International Veterinary Medicine Program. What is that?
Yeah, so this is pretty cool, and I think this is something that is really going to change things over the next few years in Latin America specifically. We are opening a training center, an international training center, and in 2012. We're going to send through this training center about 500 Latin American veterinarians. So they will be able to go in and be trained by U.S. veterinarians on surgery and treatment and all the things that veterinarians need to learn. In addition, we're going to be sending about 120 U.S. vet students. And so this would be like, seniors that are ready to graduate. And some vet schools have put this as they're giving course credit for this, and they're sending their entire graduating class down there for the entire week.
That's fantastic. So that they actually have a real life experience in another country, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. The students, I think, get a really big benefit. Vet students get a really big benefit out of this because I don't know that schools would. Well, I'll tell you what Kathy tells me. When she graduated from college, from veterinary school, she had her doctorate in veterinary medicine. She had done one spay and one neuter.
Oh, my Lord. Don't tell me these things. Oh, my God.
Yeah, and so,
where do they get their experience?
So really, I mean, and I think that this is, this is to be expected. When a veterinary clinic hires a new grad, the veterinarian knows that they're going to have to train that new grad from the ground up on surgery techniques and those things.
They don't do what like other people do. They don't then go like you do in the medical community where you have residency as a surgeon or residency as an orthopedic whatever.
They're less common. They do have residency programs, but they're much less common. Usually it'll just be a student will go graduate and they'll get hired at a vet clinic, and that's their residency.
Well, that is a big surprise. That's really interesting. So it wouldn't be real good to go to a new vet then, not a young one.
Well, I don't know that it's not good. I think that the new vet, usually they have a good system in place for a veterinarian to be trained. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have the experienced veterinarian standing in, helping out.
I see.
I don't think they just turn them loose in a room and say, hey, spay this cat.
I don't know. So, I'm going to have to know. I think in the future I'll just start asking.
Everybody in the industry, I think, really cares about animals. But
well, that's true.
What this does for the students, though, is gives them a little more experience in that area, and and I think it's something for them that I mean, it's so funny. The students, they love this because this is a huge chance for them to do what they've been studying for how many years to do this, and they finally get a chance to do it. So it's a really, really cool opportunity for them.
It's very interesting. Well, look, we're going to take our last break of the hour, and then we'll come back and take a look at some of the other upcoming trips. I'm interested in that Pacific Partnership, the collaboration with the U.S. Navy on board ships. So we'll talk about that. If you've just joined us, you're a lucky listener. Our guest is Kyle Baird from World Vets. You can find them at www.worldvets.org. World Vets goes around the world, and they really help all sorts of communities in times of disaster and in times of good keeping when they do a lot of education. And so I mentioned before the break, Kyle, that you have this amazing upcoming partnership, the Pacific Partnership, which is a collaboration with the U.S. Navy on board ships. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, so this is something we've done for a few years, and this is a really cool program that the U.S. Navy does, is that they send out a humanitarian aid ship, and they this year they're going over. I'm trying to think of it's going to be in kind of the Southeast Asia area, and they stop at. I think the locations haven't been finalized yet, but they stop in several locations. They'll stay there for a couple weeks, and they'll do humanitarian aid, whatever that area needs. And they've done everything from build a hospital, upgrade buildings, help they send doctors, dentists, so they'll do treatments on people and all that. And along with that, they have a veterinary team, and we provide the volunteers that are part of that veterinary team. And it's an awesome experience for the right person. And I think what happens is that person, some people stay on the whole trip, and it's about a 2 to 3 month trip where you're on the Navy ship or you're on the on whatever country that they're in, and you'll work all day and you'll be back on the Navy ship at night, and then when they take off, you take off with them, and that's like you're part of the ship.
How interesting.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And I mean, the Navy has been a really, really great partner for us too. They've been so good about helping us get supplies to places that are hard to get supplies to. That's one of the biggest issues is, some of the medications and stuff that we ship. There's always issues getting it through customs or just shipping it to some of these countries, and the Navy has really helped us out. They'll take a pallet for us and they'll put it in, and they can just deliver it. It takes a little bit of advanced planning, but we can get supplies to places that need it in a really great way with them.
Now, given that World Vets does so much when disaster strikes, I also see on your website that you teach people about disaster preparedness for your pet. and that there's very special needs for floods or earthquakes or hurricanes or droughts. They're different, like they are in different parts of the world that you all prepare for. So give us a few tips about preparedness for our pets.
So I would say for me, I probably would not be qualified to give any good tips for that.
Well, then let me start. Keep some extra food on hand.
Yeah. You know what? You are much better. You're probably so much better at preparing for this than I am. All I try to do is make sure that the smart people are in the right place at the right time. So yes, what are the ways to be prepared for these?
Make sure if your animal takes medicines to have extra on hand. And of course, when you're storing food and water for yourself, you think about your animals as well. That's simple enough. It's very interesting. I've worked with so many people who work with animals who have been traumatized and animals who are being, brought home from shelters or animals who have been shipped around from shelter to shelter. And one of the really easy things to do is the same thing you do for preparedness in your own household, which is when animals, as an example, just come home from a shelter for the first time, it's really important to give them a space where they know they're safe. A safe place. And for a cat, it might mean an elevated place on a bed where nobody can get to it, but it has a blanket or something it can hide under. I mean, it takes just not a lot. It just takes the mindset of making them feel safe. And I think the same thing in a disaster. Whether you have children or family members or animals, there's an element of safety that is just in terms of common experience. So if, for instance, your basement is where you go when there's some disaster, bad storm, then you want to be sure that where you have a place in your basement, if you have a dog, that there's a dog bed or something it's familiar with. It's bed, so I think some of it's just common sense that maybe for women it's very easy because we nurture people all the time, and nurturing an animal is no different. You have to make them feel safe. So looking, though, at your job, how do you work as a vice president of all these teams? What specifically are you responsible for?
Yeah, so, we're a pretty small organization. We're very lean. We try to be very efficient with donors' money. So everybody at World Vets does a little bit of everything to do this. And so a lot of things that I kind of fill in as needed in a lot of places when it comes to, helping get the teams put together, some of the communications and those things, and then a lot of the stuff that my biggest push is to work with the vendors in the veterinary industry to get them to donate product and to get them to donate the things that we need, and they really want to help, and they I think that it's a question of having us tell them these are the things that we need right now, and a lot of companies have been really great, and they've stepped up when we've needed it to, and given us product or they've done cash donations that have really helped us finance some of these things. So right now with Thailand, I've spent a lot of time working with some of the bigger suppliers in the industry. So. So that's. I would say that would be my biggest push right now is that.
When anybody in our listening audience is thinking to themselves, well, I love animals and I love to take care of things and I also like to travel, how do you screen your volunteers, and what would somebody in our listening audience who might be interested in going on one of these 1-week trips to help, what do they do?
Yeah, so the first thing you do is join World Vets. So, and it's really easy. If you go to our website, we have a Join World Vets button, and you enter in your personal information. There's the annual fee, and then you're joined. And then you can sign up for any trip, and each trip on our website shows if what spots are available, and you can just look around, and we post new trips every so often. And as a member, you automatically get an email when we post a new trip. And if you are a person that, if you're a veterinary technician, you can definitely, veterinary technicians are the positions we need the most. So really easy to get on a trip. students, the student positions fill up fast. Veterinary positions fill up fast, so you'd want to be on top of that. And then the unskilled people, those positions, it just depends on the trip. Those sometimes fill up really fast, sometimes they don't. So if you look around on there, you can kind of see what's open.
How many people all together? I mean, I remember at the start of the interview, in looking at the different numbers, you have 1,500 registered vets. How many volunteers?
Total, you mean, well, we have
just
about
the general public
members.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
3,600 members.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So we've got a good membership base, and gosh, I don't know the number of total volunteers that we've sent on that have actually gone on a trip. I don't know that offhand.
It's very interesting, though. I mean, you all have grown really quickly, and you go all over the world. How has this work affected you? I mean, you described how you went on a trip with your wife, who's a vet technician, and you got hooked on it, and now it's your life. But are there any stories you want to share with us that are particularly dear to your heart?
Yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed every trip that I've taken. I would say that there is, some of the most enjoyable people for me were the Ecuadorians, and the Ecuadorians. We worked in a town, kind of a mid-sized town in Ecuador, called Ibarra, and we set up because they kind of have like a YMCA type of building there, and that's where we set up, and the people would come in and they had this courtyard, and they'd sit in there with their pets, and we'd give them a number, and then we'd take their name. And so I'd have to go out there and call people's names, and I would just butcher their names. And so they were all laughing at me, and everybody there was laughing and joking around, and there's old ladies that they just stay all day, and they'd help me with the names, and so it was a blast. And like the people would. The funniest thing was that they had a lot of like small, fluffy white dogs there, and they would come in, and the people I think it was like mostly women owners would paint the dog's toenails pink or their claws pink. So they come in with these pink claws. It was just the funniest thing in the world. They just loved them. And they were some of the funnest people to work with, and there's a couple guys that came in. This one guy specifically, he was this real tough-looking guy. He had sunglasses on, and he was kind of a macho guy. And he had two schnauzers, and he came in with those schnauzers, and he loved these things, And it was like you could see like the tough-looking guy had this total soft spot for his dogs, And I really love that guy. He was really cool, and I think he got. In fact, I remember he got one of his dogs neutered. One was a male, and he got it neutered, too, which showed he was a real man.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So do people also bring, like, their roosters or their hens or their sheep or their goats? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So, we'll treat anything, and a lot of it depends on, what kind of area we're set up in. If it's a more rural area, we definitely start to see, any kind of animal. And then we've had some, like we had a mission in Haiti that was specifically for livestock. And then the one my wife went on too in Mongolia, that was a very interesting one where they worked on camels, yaks, and goats.
Well, that makes sense. That's what they have. Yeah.
And most.
By
of
the way,
animals,
have you ever seen that beautiful film called Weeping Camel? Oh, you must get that. Okay, write it down. It's called Weeping Camel. It's a documentary about the Mongolians and their camels, actually. It's an extraordinary film. It's a foreign film. Of course, the good ones are all foreign, but except for Woody Allen's, anyway. All right, we are almost out of time. Anything I didn't get to for you? How about a phone number?
I think we covered everything. I could talk about this for another hour.
Well, what about a phone number, Kyle, that people can call?
You mean a phone number for World Vets?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me give it to you. It's 877-688-8387. And Zoe, can I repeat that one more time?
Sure, I'll repeat it for you. 877-688-8387. That's a lot of eights. That's transformation. That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, and please give my regards to Kathy, the founder, and You all just do a beautiful job, and it makes my heart happy to know that there are people like you doing this great work.
Well, Zoe, thank you very much, and really thank you for getting the message out there, and we love animal lovers, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you all, and good night to you. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronimus and Company. Our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Courtner. Our engineer is Anita Brockington, and I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronimus.